Oh, I got one.
Try again. No, the backup button doesn't work. Okay. Let's do that. Windows Media Player. Wow. Haven't had that happen before. It's the first one because it's so simple, you know, so it's the beginning. Rhythm's simple, but it's all a lot of upbeats. So a beginner probably is not capable of keeping pulse to it and playing it. And, you know, not hard, you know, by overall standards, but that's why I'm saying, you know, if you have any doubt, start with the metal rhythm guitar method, because it's going to give you the pulse that you need. Now, lead guitar, the core method here is metal lead guitar method. And again, metal and rock, lead guitar, I mean, lead guitar is pretty much lead guitar, you know. Tone's a little different, but, you know, the first chapter here in this book, it starts out at a pretty, I would call it an intermediate level, you know, and you have to have a pretty good sense of pulse already to kind of get started with it. And I'll play a little, it's simple, but to play it well, again, to make musical phrases in time. Starts out like each of these studies in the lead guitar method has a theme, a riff, and then a solo, and then it repeats it without a solo. You can play with the guitar or without, and so. Nothing fast. It picks up pretty quick from there, though. Goes right into faster stuff. So a lot of people needed a little bit more material to progress than what's in that book, because you know you need to hit these things and repeat them enough to get better and better with them. And so I wrote the primer. The lead guitar primer starts even easier, but continues to about halfway through the level that's about halfway through that lead guitar method. And one of the things that I did on that, there's only 2 songs in it, but what I did was I wrote a rhythm track, and then there's short phrases, like a 1-bar or a 2-bar phrase, and then there's a whole, and you're supposed to echo it back, echo each one back. And if you're listening to what you're doing, the idea is to more and more, try to get it closer. And then if you get to the point where you can echo it back with variations, or start to improvise your own small changes, it gets to be a lot more fun. So that's where that is. Let's talk a couple minutes about the speed mechanics book, about taking your playing to the highest levels. There is really one most important principle that's in that book, and that is separating the hands. Are any of you familiar with what I'm talking about? Yeah. Okay, if you're playing something and it's not working, there's a glitch somewhere in your playing, and there's always a glitch because there's a bunch of mechanical processes involved in playing. And so there are right-hand processes, there are left-hand processes, and then you have to bring it all together. There's always going to be parts that are harder and parts that are less hard. There's going to be things that you're better at and things that you're not as good at. And part of that is going to be maybe unique to you. Some of it is not. Like, for example, the guitar requires us to use these 4 fingers. Maybe that's, I don't know how, some players don't use all 4, but generally speaking. But between fingers 3 and 4, the way the body mechanics are, is it's always harder to get control between these 2 than it is between, say, 1 and 3, or 1 and 4, or 1 and 2. So some things are always harder than others, and how do you determine what exactly the problem is? Well, speed mechanics digs deep into how to figure that out. And the idea is basically, if you're trying to develop, say, synchronization, and you're trying to play faster, and you want to do this, okay, and you want to hear every single note, and it's not synchronized, well, break it apart. First of all, the left hand has to be capable of playing that motion evenly. If the left hand's not doing its part evenly, and the right hand is, it's not going to work. It's not going to sound good, right? It's going to sound messy, because it is messy. On the other hand, if you're doing this, and the right hand has to cross strings, so it has to jump and move farther, and it can't do that in time, then that's the problem that's holding you up. Even if the left hand is there and the right hand isn't, well, then there's a problem too. But when you play both together, it hides the fact. You won't necessarily notice, oh, I have a problem with this hand. You'll just feel like there's tension, it feels sticky, it's not right. It doesn't sound as good as it should, and you don't know where to look. So what you first do is you separate the hands, and you make the left hand do its part, and you figure out, as I'm doing that, where is the tension? Remember Bach saying, you just put the right finger on the right fret. I'm going to take a little liberty with this statement, at the right time, and the guitar plays itself, So slow it down. How hard is it to move one finger? Right? Nothing to it. The problem, of course, is that we want to do it really fast, faster than we are ready to do it. But instead of playing the whole lick over and over and over, what if you came and boiled it down to say, you know what, this is hard for me to do. Right, whatever it is, right there, that's hard. Then the question becomes, okay, well, let me make up 40 exercises and variations of those exercises that have one thing in common, that hard thing, over and over and over. And let me imagine how many variations I can spin out, and can I even make up music using that difficult pattern? Maybe I can write some little piece of music or some licks or something that uses it over and over, and it's like, wow, if you do that, that thing that was hard will not be hard anymore. In fact, it'll become one of your go-to, licks. It'll become one of the mechanics that you can rely on and play in your sleep. And of course, when we ultimately master the guitar totally, you want to be able to rely on all those mechanics in your sleep. So, so that you can just cold grab it and whip it off, and it's all there. You know, that's the goal. As my right hand doesn't have to worry about which strings I hit because the left hand's going to take care of any extra noise anyway. So let's make the transition. Now, when you switch, this is the part he should practice, right here. That's the hard part, right? So just do that. And build in both directions from the, and by both directions, I mean, first play the hard transition and make sure you're doing it right. And then back up a couple notes ahead and play through the hard transition. And then play through the hard transition and play a few notes behind. And then a longer phrase, and then the whole phrase. But first, if you can't do this without noise, you can't play the riff without noise, right? And this is the easiest way to fix the noise. Yeah, I would get my first finger in place here and make its job, when it jumps to this, when you jump to this note, this finger has also jumped here and touching. Now, yeah, now do it slow. Don't sacrifice the rightness of your position, but make your goal to make the transition as quick as you can without the noise. And ideally, you'll be, they'll just feel totally connected. The transitions between the notes are really what we're working on more often than the notes themselves. You know, and this is a good case in point. So try it slow. It's clean now. I'm hearing the notes. There's a little transition that's still not quite there, but if you practice that in maybe 10 minutes, a couple of days, you would be able to come and play that riff and play it really well without any extra noise. Now, how long have you been, when did you learn that riff?
I learned that a few months ago, probably.
Okay.
Like, it's usually at band practice when we're all playing it, and sometimes it's a little sloppy, so
yeah.
I never really sat down and actually practiced any of it.
Right, you're just playing it, and that's the thing. That's what most of us will do, is we'll learn it, and we'll play it, and we won't question what it takes to play it better. We'll notice, well, it's a little sloppy, and we'll hope that the slop goes away. You know? Slop doesn't really go away, though, you know? You play, I had a statement, I don't remember where I wrote this, but the mechanics of it are really critical, and that's where so much of the expression of guitar playing comes out of. I mean, you can't overestimate how important it is. So I'm glad you brought it up. Let's take a look. Well, you know what you're doing is right. You've got thumbs up, and there's a pivot from this point, and that's where the right motion is. So,
are you using your arm at all?
No, it feels like I'm twisting my wrist a little bit.
I just feel like I can't get that.
It's not fast.
Wide.
Well, that's wide. It's wide. It's just.
Not fast.
That's okay. I would rather that the vibrato be slow and controlled, because speed will come as you do it. And the fact that you've been working on it for a year, you know, to develop a good vibrato from no vibrato, it's going to take at least that long. You know, that's not unusual or anything, you know. You know, it reminds me, when I first started working with Mark Tremonti, I was teaching him, starting in about 2003, lead guitar. And
That's a big drop.
he did not have, his vibrato stunk, you know, and he'd been playing guitar for 15 years, you know, and after we worked with it a while, it took him at least a year to get a really good, well-developed vibrato, and he's doing it every day, you know, I mean, he hit it hard. So don't think that there's anything weird or wrong or that you're going slow. A lot of times you might think that, oh, I heard of some other guy and he's burning up the guitar and he's only been playing 2 years. It's like, well, that's kind of the exception. I don't really think that there's anything that I do. Well, first of all, there's nothing that I can do that any of you with putting the same amount of time in cannot do. There's nothing, I don't think that I'm particularly, I mean, it took me years, you know, and I spent a lot of time on it. I'm not like the fastest learner. I've seen other people that can pick up guitar, and most people, in my experience though, having taught hundreds of students and talked to lots and lots of people about it, most people learn at a very, very similar pace. The amount of variation between some people, you know, and others, there is a little bit, but it's not that much. It's more about how you approach it and how much you spend doing it, and if you spend the time the right way. I think your vibrato was pretty good. Play more, play in context, like play some licks or...
Working now for some reason.
Yeah, it's good.
Like something like that. Does that just sound like?
Those are wide. That's a wide. I would call that a wider than normal vibrato. That's kind of an '80s kind of get your attention hair rock vibrato. You know. Try a short. Like, there's so many different ways to do it. Try one like this. Make it short, yeah, fast. Now try this. There you go.
At a given point, it loses control and goes out of tune.
Well, try something like this then. The version of what we talked about with looking at that little treble spot. For the treble spot, in this case, it's a treble spot of connecting two things. So in other words, this and this. You can go slow, and then fast, slow. See what I'm saying? Try that. Try without changing. You know, maybe you can pick it again. You know, but stay on the note. Fast, fast, slow and wide, fast, and then maybe descending. You know. Keep, and you know what? Back and forth, fast, slow, fast, slow. How do you? Somebody asked me once. Keep going. I'll just talk about. Somebody asked me once, how do you? I'm playing in pentatonic and I want to break into diatonic runs. How do I do that? Do you know the pentatonic? Yeah. Do you know the diatonic? Yeah. You do it. You make yourself, you know what I mean? It's like he's looking for a way. It's like, okay, well, you know the scale there. Just, you know, decide how can I go and use this? Give an example, and then practice it. And it's the same thing. You have a lack of control at being able to change between the different vibratos that you want, which, by the way, is a really important skill if you want a good control of overall playing. That's really important. Just do it. Also, try playing a lick once where where you bend up at the tail. Yeah, and try to do it on all the notes. That's a form of, that's good. That's good. As you go and just experiment around, try to find all the different ways of bending. You can take a note and bend it up slow. You feel all the tension in there, you know, that's... The other thing is, a lot of times we are accustomed to bending only notes in the pentatonic scale, you know, that are standard bends. Like, okay, you're an A, and we're used to this. That's a fine starting point, but what about bending? Every note can be bent, and then you can do diatonic bends too. So. You know, there's no need to just stick with those bends. So then, let's try that, like where you're playing, you're in E minor. I like that one. It's the second. It's hard. It sounds like you're not releasing all the way back to the unbent note. It's hard because there's not as much sustain up there. Anybody anybody noticed that that there's some vibrato work that you guys might, how many of you could improve your vibrato? Okay. All right. I think that'll do it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Give it up for Dave Richards, everybody. Saw a couple melting faces there in the front.